Hello, Third Academy community. I am Katinka Harshani, the head of network and partnerships. And for those of you not familiar with Third Academy, we are a Web3 education collective and professional network for people looking to launch and grow their careers in Web3. Our flagship marketing cohort has been run 3 times now. And as part of that, we have started a series with Web3 marketers and growth leads that we admire, talking all things Web3 and the Metaverse. So in that context, I am super excited to announce today's guest, Tom Sargent. Tom is a Web3 marketer and growth hacker who has been helping brands and creators launch their own Web3 ideas and experiences since 2020, mostly focused on blockchain gaming and the Metaverse. He has also been a data-driven marketer for 7 years in a variety of tech industries, from AI through to drone delivery during COVID. And I've got to ask about this cleaning up space debris. I hope he's going to clarify that as part of his introduction. And today we are going to be talking about brand building in the Metaverse and how brands can think about customer experiences across physical, digital, and hybrid spaces. So before we kick off, Tom, would you mind just introducing yourself, what you're working on, and explaining space debris?
Absolutely. Yes. So thank you. Excellent introduction. Thank you very much. So yeah, my name's Tom. I suppose I'll start at the beginning. My background is robotics and engineering. So I studied for my master's far too long ago now, too long to remember when. And shortly after leaving university, I went and joined a big engineering firm called Thales, and I was in their R&D department. So I had the privilege of working on tons of different interesting projects, some for military, some for space, drones, railways, transport systems, all kinds of stuff. It was excellent fun. I was primarily a sort of algorithms and design engineer, so spent a lot of time writing and testing sort of cutting edge problem solving solutions essentially. And we had all kinds of wonderful problems thrown at us, like pattern recognition in, busy urban areas. You're looking at traffic patterns and things like that. Multi-agent systems when you've got cars and infantry and drones and planes, and how do they work and coordinate together? And one of the weird, wonderful ones that came up one day was, is there a way that we can sort of solve the problem that is this growing debris surrounding our planet from old satellites and, bits of things that have just been caught in our orbit and stuff. We looked at a variety of different solutions, some including lasers to try and give the debris a bit of propulsion in a different direction and send them out into space and stuff. But it never got past the research phase, that one, as far as I'm aware. So it was excellent. And now today, and for the last sort of 3 years or so, I've been very much in the Web3 space as it's developed, primarily as a sort of data-driven marketer. So I do a lot of market analytics, industry analytics for specific causes, and try and determine which direction a company should put its marketing efforts, whether that's, event hosting and podcasts, or, some of the more traditional marketing stuff like SEO and pay-per-click and stuff like that, or social media and things. So just making sure that the experiments, as we call them, are yielding good results for the company, and that we're getting more traction and more eyes on us and more, share of voice and things like that. So that's primarily what I do. For the last year and a half, I've been working at a gaming/metaverse company. It was called Admix. It's now called Landvault. We had a couple of different products. The main product was we put adverts into video games, but rather than the annoying pop-up ones where you wait 15 seconds and click the little X and it's completely stopped your gameplay, these are actually embedded into the environment. So whether you're driving around a virtual city, you're passing billboards and bus stops, and people are wearing shirts that have actual real-world brands on them, like Coca-Cola and McDonald's and stuff. And that very clearly applies very nicely to the virtual worlds that we see with the Metaverse. So Landvault, as it's now known, continues to do that. Is actually the world's biggest Metaverse building studio. So not only do we do the product placement advertisement, we also work with brands to build their ideal virtual world, whether that's a massive sports stadium or a racetrack for a car company or a giant hamburger for a food company, or whatever it is they envision. We sort of bring it to life with our colleagues and our team of designers. So that's where we are at the moment.
So I'll start with the easiest question or not, how would you actually describe what the metaverse is? And what are principles of operating in the metaverse that brands should be aware of?
Very good question. I think there's a bit of a misconception at the moment, maybe a good thing, maybe not. But I think a lot of people, when they hear the word metaverse, they immediately jump to like this virtual world that you're walking around and you've got goggles on potentially, and it's basically a glorified video game. Whilst that is very much the case with some of the metaverse platforms out there, it's like the infancy of the metaverse. It's the first step of the metaverse becoming a true thing, at least the way that I see it. For me, the metaverse is the next generation of the way we engage in the big network that we call the internet. Some people watching this will remember MySpace pages where you had a bio section and some images and maybe your favorite music played whenever someone went onto your profile. And that was very much a 2D on a screen representation of the digital identity of you, what your digital person was. I see the metaverse as the next stage of that, so that rather than having a 2D bit with a bio section, you'll have a piece of land, 3D land, where your avatar exists and guests can come and walk around your 3D land. And you might have an About Me section that has all your favorite books and your music collection and your art collection of NFTs and stuff. And then there might be a section where you can go and play games, and a section where you show off all your food pictures, but rather than, 2D pictures, they're 3D models of food you've made and stuff. So it's essentially that taking that 2D plane that everyone used to look at and making it into a 3D version of everything that represents digital you. And that might be hosted on one platform, but the digital version of you can jump around to these other platforms. So there'll be one of you rather than loads of fractionalized versions of you, rather than having a LinkedIn you and a social, and an Instagram you and a Steam you and an Xbox 360 you that are all digital versions of you with their own products and their own things. It will be one version of you that, is joined together. There's a single thread that joins all of those digital people together. So that's what I kind of see Web3 and the metaverse being. As I say, we're in the infancy, and at the moment it's very much a virtual world that you walk around that's kind of like a game. But it's starting to bring more characteristics, like you will have a wallet when you go to Decentraland, and in that wallet will have all your Decentraland items and any crypto you have, any NFTs. So we're starting to see that thread that joins all the worlds together become a reality. And that's kind of where the metaverse is at the moment. But in the future, it will evolve into more and more pieces. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I have really no idea what happened. Can we try that question again? Just kick
Yeah,
off.
we can do. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Sorry. Okay, we are.
Did you get any of it, or was it all?
No, I think I got it. And I think it will record. But if we could just do that question one more time, just in case something happened. Okay, cool. So I will start with the easiest question, or maybe not, which is, how would you describe what the metaverse is, and what are principles that brands should be aware of when they operate in the metaverse?
Yeah, so currently when people hear the word metaverse, they probably think of basically a video game or a virtual world, and they might be wearing goggles to navigate it and stuff, which is true for now, and it's definitely where the metaverse is at the moment. But the metaverse is very much in its infancy, at least the way that I see it. When I think of the metaverse, and there might be people watching this that can remember such thing as a MySpace page, that's kind of what I see the metaverse becoming. So on a MySpace page, you typically had an About Me section with a bit of a bio. You had pictures of you. You had music that played that was like your favorite music at the time. And people could visit your page and basically get a sense of the digital representation of you. I see the metaverse as the next generation of that, and basically the 3D version of that, where rather than a static page on a screen, you have a plot of land with a building that represents you. And when you walk into the building, there's an About Me section that has all your favorite artwork. There's a section that has, 3D representations of your favorite food. It has your NFT collection. It has games that you've played, trophies that you've won from those games, items from those games, in this virtual space that represents digital you. And there might be different rooms that have professional version and all your certificates and your LinkedIn stats and stuff like that, which is kind of what I imagine the digital representation of you becoming. So the metaverse is the 3D version of those pages. The other thing is there are many different metaverse platforms, and there will eventually be blockchain games that are basically metaverse platforms as well. Whereas currently you have digital you has a LinkedIn, and then there's another digital you that has an Instagram, there's another digital you that has Xbox and Steam and Spotify, etc., etc. But none of those digital versions can talk to each other and share information across all the platforms. It's very fractionalized. Whereas in the big Web3 movement that's going on, which Metaverse is part of, that will carry through. So you will have a wallet, and you may have your favorite songs stored in your wallet, and you may have items from Minecraft in your wallet, and you may have assets that you've earned in Decentraland in your wallet, and that one thing represents you and across all platforms. And you might keep all of those in your virtual home on your virtual land to represent you and stuff. So I guess that's a very far-fetched way of saying that it's basically the blending of digital and physical worlds coming together. So just as you have a house or an apartment or whatever and all your stuff in it, and you have a bank account with all your stuff in it, and you can access everything, through your identity, we're starting to see the digital identity have those powers as well in these virtual worlds. One of the things that brands need to be aware of is that information, because a lot of it's written on the blockchain, describes a very good picture of who someone is. You can see potentially their eating habits, their listening habits, and things like that all in one place, which can be very overwhelming. And we need to think carefully as a society about how we let brands in on that information and what bits are relevant for them. Like, does McDonald's need to know anything about your medical history? Probably not, So it's an interesting time at the moment to see how these brands are going to evolve. And in an ideal world, the brands will dissolve, really. They won't be a brand that's owned by one person, right at the top. They will become a brand that's owned by all of the people that take part in that brand. So every time you buy a car from Ford, you own part of Ford and you become part of the brand in itself, kind of like an affiliate because you're a part of it. But more, you become a stakeholder in the company. So it might not be such a horrible question when you say, should McDonald's know anything about your medical history? If you are a part of McDonald's and you get to decide, I'm a McDonald's stakeholder, I can decide, no, we don't need to know anything about medical history. So that whole societal diplomacy is sort of happening in a digital way, which is interesting.
Nice. And actually,
that's a very long answer.
No, and it was a great one. Actually, very clear answer, because I think what is the metaverse is often a question that trips up a lot of people. So thank you. I think the way that actually came across you is that you started a LinkedIn series profiling 30 Web3 projects over 30 days. And so I'm actually curious, through that process or, anything else that you've done in Web3, what is a metaverse project that you've come across that you really admire that is building the metaverse and using the metaverse in the way that you think it should be used, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've loved doing the 30 Web3 projects in 30 days. And I specifically wanted to find the smaller projects rather than the big ones you hear about all the time. And I've come across some absolute gold, to be honest. As for metaverse ones, I really like this one project by a company called Sports Icon. They are taking an interesting approach to the sports metaverse, where they are partnering directly with athletes. So they're going to, football athletes, boxing, wrestling, soccer, depending on where you are. And they're basically creating clubhouse experiences in the metaverse where you can go and hang out with these icons and these athletes. If you're a huge, I don't know, Lukaku fan, you can go and hang out in his virtual house and see him and meet him and do things like that, which is amazing. It's kind of similar to what Snoop Dogg did with his sort of metaverse and crypto experiences, where you got to go and, have private events and private concerts and stuff with him and his friends, but applied to the sportsing world. So that's really cool. So big shout out to Sports Icon. That's really interesting stuff they're doing. Another very good metaverse piece that we have is it's kind of a replacement for, tools like this, like Zoom and Google Meets and stuff, where you actually have a tiny 2D like pixel avatar. It's called gather.town. And you can have like 60 people. So you could have all your work colleagues, and you can go to the bar together and have, sort of water cooler kind of conversations and stuff. And it just gives that next level of interaction to Zoom calls, basically. And if, we used it a couple of times in Landvault, and we just had it in the background, and you'd occasionally see people walking around the virtual office and interacting and stuff. And you can go into a meeting room and all kinds of stuff. So GatherTown, very interesting thing as well. Probably not perfect for everyone, but if you have any gaming in you, then you'll love it. It's great fun. Yeah. So those are two metaverse brands, I suppose, that are doing well. Yeah.
Nice. And I think in previous roles, including at Landvault, you've also worked with traditional brands that are dipping their feet in the metaverse. So kind of another side of that coin is what are offline brands that you think are really paving the way, and how to use the metaverse and how to create digital and hybrid experiences?
Yeah, so part of the analytics that I do is looking at these sort of industries that are pushing forward, which we'll get into in a little bit. But we do see a trend of, particularly in the fashion industry, big fashion brands are really pushing the way. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, because clothes, like physical clothing items, especially luxury items, are already so highly sought after and collected that it was a marriage made in heaven to bring the NFT collectibles and clothing collectibles together. So we see a lot of wearables in the metaverse, and a lot of high-end luxury brands are leaning into that wearable collectible narrative quite heavily. Like you see the likes of Gucci, Nike, Adidas, they're all big players in the metaverse. And they are very much paving the way and helping set the bar, and, maybe make a couple of mistakes so that other companies can learn from them. And eventually we'll see more mainstream clothing brands enter as well in a much more affordable way for the users, which is super exciting, because I'm not very much of a big fashion person, but even I can understand that, those Nike trainers are really cool. I wish I had some of those, even if they're virtual. But a lot of brands are, none of those ones I mentioned in particular, but a lot of brands are struggling to see the metaverse for what it really is. A lot of them see it just as another channel, like it's just add it onto social media or email marketing or whatever. Metaverse marketing is just another channel for them, which for their audience might be all it needs to be. But I think they're really missing out on the experiences that they can build. I guess a good analogy is, I've been in advertising for a while now, and I've never really understood why fragrance companies make TV adverts. For a long time, I never understood. I was like, it must cost them millions of pounds. They make these things. It's like, not like you can smell it. It's always just, some gorgeous woman walking over a bridge in Paris. And you're like, okay, I don't really understand what that tells me about your product. I've completely flipped on that understanding now, because really what those fragrance people were doing is they were selling an experience without having to talk about the product at all. You would watch a Dior advert or whatever, and you would get the understanding of what that brand is all about. And some people would be like, yes, I want to be part of that brand. I want to be in that interaction. And when we move into the metaverse, that's what it needs to be about. It's not about the product. It's not about, should I buy an Asus or a Dell laptop? They're basically the same. What it's about is Asus needs to start making this experiences in the metaverse that make people go, yes, I want to be an Asus user. That's the image I want for my life. That's where I want to go. So these fragrance brands are like 400 years ahead of everyone in terms of the metaverse experience building, because they have all this history of creating an emotion and an experience in someone without having to be all about the product and the specs or whatever it is. So that's another big challenge that brands are going to have in the metaverse is, okay, yeah, you are here to sell your car or your deodorant or your drink or whatever it is. But really what you now have to be thinking about is, how do we make people want to experience our product rather than just buy it and have it? So that's a big challenge, which again is why fashion brands are doing so well, because you're buying more than just the logo on the shirt. You're buying the whole lifestyle that comes with it, and your friends will see you wearing the shirt and they'll think of you in a certain way and stuff. So that's where fashion is really leading the way in the metaverse at the moment.
We just touched on fashion, and I guess a little bit like the luxury industry, which was already creating experiences and sort of aspiration around its brand. Where else have you seen strong uptake of metaverse experiences from brands and customers? And, the flip side of that question is, are there industries where the ingredients would be there, but the momentum isn't?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, sports is starting to come on quite heavily now in 2022. We're starting to see more sports, brands and things come online, which is excellent. There's a couple of other hiccups there because some sports require age restrictions, and that's still a work in progress with Web3 anyway. particularly if gambling's involved. So park that for a minute. But so sports is taking up, music's becoming very good. Being able to, particularly with the pandemic, being able to host virtual events has been very important for the music industry and artists in general. So we're starting to see sports and music come up quite big. And a couple of other ones that you wouldn't expect, like the automotive industry has been doing quite well because, well, not every brand in the automotive industry, but a couple of them have leaned heavily into don't drive however many miles and come and see our car and spend all that gas and damage the environment, particularly with electric cars. Come and virtually walk around our car and get in it and take it for a virtual test drive is very interesting. And I guess they're kind of ahead because they need to have the 3D models anyway to manufacture the car. So they've got all of the assets in place. They've got all the ingredients, like you say. So we have seen quite a few automotive brands like Ford and stuff that are launching their electric vehicle line. And part of their marketing campaign is a metaverse sort of marketing campaign, which is excellent to see. It's a really good use case. Ones that you'd expect to be good, you'd expect the entertainment industry to be a bit bigger. You know, the likes of sort of Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, things like that, streaming services, movies, things like that. You'd expect that to be a bit bigger, and you'd expect, especially because of the pandemic, people couldn't go to the cinema and stuff. Well, why can't they go to a virtual screening or a virtual premiere or whatever? You could buy tickets to the premiere. I'm not seeing a huge uptake on that. A couple of film festivals have done metaverse, launches and stuff, which is quite cool, but it's not been as big as we thought it would be because, especially seeing as all of the tech is done, like, people can stream to a phone or to a computer very easily. You can buy tickets as NFTs, which you own in your wallet to say, yes, I went to the premiere of the new James Bond or whatever. You would expect for them to be quite big, but they're not as huge as I would have thought at the moment. Other industries, there's some obvious ones where it is quite hard, like food and beverages. It's quite hard to get into the metaverse because there's a reason why you're buying those products. They're not a luxury item. Yeah, the education sector you'd expect it to be very big, but then again, you wouldn't because they don't get quite as much funding as these other industries. But there are some incredible projects out there that are bringing excellent education through virtual worlds. You can go and walk with the dinosaurs and go to, the Renaissance period and stuff, which is really, really cool. And I think it's going to be huge in the future. But there's sort of a secondary level of education you need. So not only are you trying to learn about ancient Rome, you've now got to learn how to use the metaverse. So it's a layer of complexity potentially. But as kids, we've always seen kids just take to new technology like ducks to water. So I'm sure they'll lead the way, which will be amazing. I would definitely go back to university if I could do it all virtually as well. That'd be sick. Love that.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement there, especially if I didn't have to spend all that money on London rent. But
exactly.
I kind of want to ask you what you think that the blockers are. But first, there's a sector that we talked about previously that I know that you've also worked in, which is gaming, where the reception of the metaverse from gamers has, I think, been quite mixed.
Yeah.
A lot of skepticism. Maybe you could just talk about that for a moment and also why you think that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very good topic for me because I'm a huge gamer and I work in the metaverse. So I very much can see both sides of the argument very clearly. You would have thought that gamers would flock to the metaverse and virtual worlds in droves, but it's actually been the opposite reaction. And quite a lot of the gaming industry and gamers alike are quite opposed to the metaverse. I think from my understanding and my research, it comes from a very core social understanding within individuals. Essentially, and this is where I agree with the gamers, is after a long day of work or whatever, you've been out, whatever, you just want to get home. A lot of people unwind with gaming and you just want to put on your favorite game, pick up your controller and just sort of zone in for a couple of hours and not have to think about economies of what am I, suddenly the NFT world is introduced. I've now got to think that every piece of item I've got is now got a value in. Sometimes that's too much pressure on top of just the relaxing environment of playing a game. I don't have to think about the economy. I don't have to think about the security of making sure everything I've got is now protected and in a wallet or in a cold wallet sometimes. Some people don't want that. And then you don't want to have to deal with other players that are only there to try and make money. You want players to be there to enjoy the game and the gameplay. So there are a couple of those, pretty core elements to Web3 that gamers are opposed to because they just want to enjoy the game. They don't want to have to think about the economy and the security and the other players that are like that. So I can fully understand that aspect. On the other hand, I think it is only a matter of time before a company out there does blockchain gaming or does the metaverse correct, and they put gameplay first and foremost, and all of the other stuff is just back end stuff that the gamers don't even really notice. Once someone does that, it'll explode overnight. A great sort of, I suppose, imaginary example would be when Pokemon Go came out, it took the world by storm. Absolutely. Everyone was playing it. Grandmas to little kids, everyone was playing it. If Niantic had released Pokemon Go maybe 5 or 6 years later, and every Pokemon you collected was an NFT and it was worth actual money, and there was in-game currency and stuff like that, I think the world would have suddenly gone, oh, I completely understand blockchain gaming. I completely understand NFTs, because it would have been made into such a simple, way to explore and discover this technology. But that never happened. It was released before that. Yeah, I think it would have changed the game and changed the story. But there are some game companies out there that are doing fantastic things. Nyan Heroes, go and check them out. Their gameplay looks incredible. They're built by proper game studio people from Ubisoft and EA and all of that. So they're going to produce a fantastic game that just happens to have the Web3 capabilities. So I'm very much looking forward to playing that. That's going to be huge.
Got to check that out. I guess Pokemon Go was the
and it's for a good cause. They're trying to save save endangered cats and stuff around the world. So it's for a good cause.
Nice. Okay, it's going to be on my list. And building off sort of the last two questions, I think there's a couple of blockers that you've already touched on. So barrier of, for education, also educating the customer on what the metaverse is. Barriers to using the metaverse for brands that really do require some sort of like touch related experience. And then also kind of misalignment to customers that might be caused by some companies optimizing for economics as opposed to enjoyment. What are the main barriers that you think have to be overcome before metaverse becomes a mainstream place for brands and customers to interact?
Yeah, so there's the list for that question is monumentally huge. There's thousands and thousands of things that need to be overcome. Much like when the web was first launched, there was usability problems. Back then, not everybody had a computer, so they just weren't expecting the millions of people to use the internet. So even the infrastructure wasn't prepared in Web 1. Yeah, the user interfaces were horrible. A lot of websites, this is before Google exists, so you had to know the URL you wanted to go there. And quite a lot of those URLs were shared by word of mouth offline and things like that. So we're very much in that stage now with Web3. There's no search engine for Web3. There's no way to discover all of this stuff. So that's a big issue that all brands and all Web3 companies need to come together and solve, is the searchability and indexing of things. And then there's other problems with, the cost of this stuff, because we're not at the moment, Ethereum hasn't gone through what they're calling the merge, which is moving from proof of work to proof of stake. So it's going to make it much more affordable. But right now it costs far too much to do a lot of the things that people expect to be able to do, just by the nature of the technology and the way that you read and write from the chain. So there's a lot of fundamental pieces that need to be corrected. For brands in particular, I think the main thing will be the cost. At the moment, the reason we're seeing luxury brands and, big automotive industry and, things like that is because they have the money to either experiment with this stuff or to just use as a PR. They can just do something in the metaverse and say, hey, look, we're in the metaverse. Good for us. The cost is huge. We're a long way from seeing your local coffee shop or your local barbers doing anything on Web3 because it's just far, far too expensive. And that the cost unfolds into multiple problems: the infrastructure, the searchability, the return on investment, all of that stuff. So that's really the biggest thing. But the biggest thing for brands to think about is, and this goes just for Web2 marketing, is, does my audience need this? Does my audience want this? And they need to ask themselves those questions and go and find the answers and talk to their customers to understand when is a good time for them to join Web3. And I think that's one of the fundamentals that any digital marketer will tell you is, do a customer journey map, go and talk to your customers, get feedback before you make these decisions, because there might be a better alternative out there. We've spoken to people before at Landvault that have said, I need to build a metaverse, blah, blah, blah. I want people to be able to go to this place and there's a maze game and they discover an item, blah, blah, blah. And you sit back and you go, well, you don't actually need any of the Web3 stuff. You just want a game. So just go and make a game. You don't need to do the metaverse piece because it's not what you're looking for and it's not what your users need. So sometimes it isn't right for people at the moment and they need to save the money for something better potentially. So yeah, I think the most important thing is think about your audience first and your customers.
And thinking about that audience and those customers, other than early adopters, in the future, do you think that the mainstream of customers even need to be conscious of what the metaverse is and them being in a metaverse?
No, in the same way that most people on this call don't know the ins and outs of HTTPS and they don't know, what TCP IP, data protocols are and things like that. No, it will all become much more colloquial and manageable for everyday users. You need a browser, you need a computer, and you need an internet connection. Then you can go and do whatever. You don't need to know what your browser is doing. You don't need to know how it was built. You don't need to know what version it is and all kinds of stuff like that. So it will definitely become much more colloquial. In fact, we probably won't even call it the metaverse. We'll just say the internet, and it will just be what we now call the internet. It'll just envelop everything. But there are still people and engineers and designers required to make it all. And hopefully some of those are listening now, but it will eventually just become so mainstream that you do it. You don't really need to know how your engine works in your car. You need to know that this brake goes forward and this door goes faster and this brake goes less.
I definitely agree. And just going back to the piece that you said around always starting with your customer first and understanding what it is that they actually need and how it is that they actually want to engage. Something that's kind of interesting is you actually see Web3 companies and companies that are going big on the metaverse also investing in physical locations. So Meta having physical places to basically sell VR, or Solana, I think, opening physical store location in New York. So what do you think is driving that? And then actually, when you have a Web3 or metaverse company, how should they think about this relationship of physical, hybrid, and digital?
Yeah. So it did take me by surprise a little bit to see Solana open a physical store. That's kind of like the US dollar opening a store. It's kind of like, okay, a bit interesting, but I don't think the physical locations like storefronts are entirely necessary unless there is a physical product that comes with it. So, like you said, the VR headset, that's more applicable for a physical store. I think what a better solution would be is to combine our current, logistics that we have globally. So like, you can order something on Amazon and it'll arrive pretty quickly, and Amazon works out how that work happens. I think combining that with the digital products is a much better solution. So kind of looking at the Shopify model here, where you have a product online, you can create some t-shirts or some artwork or whatever. And if there is a physical product of that that's associated with it, so, I buy a piece of NFT art, and part of me purchasing that means that I'm going to get a physical print copy. I think rather than having a store, let's create the logistical network, the drop shipping network, essentially, that says, okay, Tom's just bought this thing. This is his address. We need to send him the print. There doesn't need to be a store. There just needs to be an on-demand print service, a courier service, and, a billing service, essentially. I think that's probably what's more likely to happen is we'll see that. And I think there will always be physical stores for certain things, but I think as we hit this recession and as we've seen from the pandemic, the amount of physical stores is going to go down quite drastically because a lot of people prefer to do things online. It's much safer, from a physical point of view to do that. And it's much more cost effective for the businesses to not have to own a store, pay the overheads, pay the staffing costs, when really they can do what Amazon does and just ship stuff everywhere. So I think we'll start to see that model take place between the physical digital worlds, where you buy a digital product and you get shipped the physical product, rather than you buy the digital product and then you have to go to the store and get it. I think that would be weird. There will still be some luxury places, like if you buy some virtual Louis Vuitton shoes, you probably will be asked to come to the Louis Vuitton store to be fitted and have the whole luxury experience and have the champagne and all of that stuff, but I don't think that will happen for every sale. Not really. But if there's a developer out there who's thinking of making the drop shipping equivalent or the Shopify equivalent for Web3, you're going to make a lot of money, and best of luck to you.
That actually reminds me of something that we spoke about briefly previously, which was kind of the rails of commerce in the metaverse, and how, often at the moment you're basically directed out of this experience that you're in to complete your purchase. So I'm wondering if actually you could touch on the state of metaverse commerce at the moment, and what are the things that need to be fixed?
So metaverse commerce, e-commerce 2.0 is a little bit behind the actual platform development. And there's a lot of reasons involving, financial regulations and the SEC and stuff like that. But quite often, like you said, not always. There are, I'll mention some people who are doing it the right way, but quite often you'll be walking around the metaverse, you'll see a product you like, you click the product, another tab opens. So you're essentially leaving the metaverse and you go to a normal web page and you add it to your basket and you pay for it normally. There are obviously huge problems with that, in that it's completely ruins your immersion and you get pulled out of the place. And that's really not what these metaverse platforms want to happen. But the benefit is that it's something very familiar to people. And I think a lot of people, whenever they use crypto, especially for the first few times, are very nervous about it because it seems new and scary and stuff. So what those brands are doing are saying, okay, well, we'll give people the experience of seeing the digital product and stuff, but we'll take them somewhere familiar and hold their hand and they can pay for it with fiat currency. That's fine for now, I suppose. But we do all need to overcome the hurdle at some point where you don't leave, you pay, you're in Decentraland, you find some shoes you like, you pay for them with the mana that you have, the Decentraland token mana, and it comes out of your wallet, and then bam, the shoes are on your feet and you continue to explore. That's what we all want to get to. And there are a lot of excellent companies that are helping make that happen. Boson Protocol is one example, where they're developing this commerce protocol, which is essentially like a metaverse version of a shopping cart, and you add all your items and then you pay in the cryptocurrency. But the user interface needs to be perfected. The way that the partners on board and the way that the transactions are done need to be perfected, and the cost needs to come down to make those transactions, which hopefully we'll see with the merger. But that's kind of where we are at the moment. And I think nearly everybody that does metaverse commerce is striving for that deeper immersive experience. And it won't be long until we get there. I'd say less than a year before you start to see big transactions happening within the metaverse without you having to be pulled out. Yeah.
And kind of bearing in mind some of those challenges around the sort of state of metaverse commerce and really, I guess, the proliferation of metaverses, if I'm a brand who's getting started, how should I actually think about which metaverse I build in? And is there a risk if I get it wrong?
Yes, there's a big financial risk at the moment, because some of the land that you're required to have to build your store or whatever it is can be quite pricey depending on the different platform you're on. But again, this kind of goes back to thinking about the customer. You need to decide where your audience is. And it's much the same with the physical world. Like if you're, a luxury clothing brand, you're probably not going to put your stores in service stations on the motorway. You're going to put them in the center of London and Paris and Japan, big fashion places. So in the same way, you need to think about where your customers are in these virtual worlds and what the prime locations for your audience are. And this might differ between different platforms, but you need to make sure that you're on the doorstep of your customers. So that's the first thing. So, and there's loads of excellent research out there, and there's analytics tools. There's a fantastic analytics tools called June Analytics and Metametrics. Make an amazing dashboard that will give you all this information. But you can find out who is in which platform and make your decision based on that. So the most important thing is put your stores or your land where your audience is. Yeah, the cost is still quite high to buy these pieces of land and do the development. There are alternatives out there. You can rent the land, you can lease the land from existing landowners, but those are still very early day sort of protocols.
Kind of bearing in mind, I guess, the maybe different states of development across different metaverses and virtual worlds, and where we're at in terms of enabling metaverse commerce. If I'm a brand that is just getting started, and I'm thinking about which virtual world or which metaverse to invest in, how should I think about that? And what is my risk if I get it wrong?
Yeah, so very good question, and quite a common question that I get asked, actually. So there is a risk involved, and depending on the land and the platform you choose, it can be quite a high financial risk. Not all platforms are the same. They don't all run on the same technology, and some are 10, 20 times more expensive to buy land in. So that is the risk if you get it wrong, is that you have that sort of wasted capital. The way to get around that is to basically do your customer research and your due diligence correctly. And there's tons of analytics platforms and reports out there. In fact, Metametrics is a company that does specifically Metaverse related analytics. You can get loads of this information for free. So just Google Metametrics, June Analytics, I think, as well. But really what you're trying to understand is, just like in the real physical world, where are your customers? You're not going to put your stores, in places that they aren't. If you're a luxury clothing brand, you're not going to put your stores on service stations on the motorway. You're going to put them in Paris and London and Japan and central luxury clothing places. Same goes in these virtual worlds. So do your customer research, look at your customer journey, and work out the best places that your audience hangs out in. That's the first thing you want to know. So if you looking for a younger audience, you might find them on things like Roblox and Sandbox more than you will Decentraland and the other side, because you tend to find an older audience in there. And then when it comes to looking at locations, a lot of these virtual worlds have a map, just like a real world map. And you can see there are generally sectors. So you'll have like quite a lot of the sporting events happen here, and the music events happen here, and the fashion events here. So depending on what your audience is, you might want to consider the prime location to place and purchase your land. The land can be quite expensive. You don't necessarily have to go for the biggest and all eggs in one basket kind of thing. You can start small and then expand over time and buy more parcels of land to develop more stuff. I would encourage that experimental approach. Start smaller, build a little bit, see what the uptake is, and then increase on that. Yeah, and there are other options as well. Like, we're starting to see funds and DAOs and communities come together where you have a lot of people who own land already, and they will happily rent it to you for a period of time, kind of becoming landlords of virtual real estate. So you don't necessarily have to own the piece of land. You can rent it for the duration of your campaign and stuff. Save yourself a lot of money doing that, which is definitely something to look at. So yeah, I guess the best answer is you're going to have to go and do a deep dive into the analytics and find out where your audience is. The good thing about that is there's not millions and millions of these virtual worlds. There's only really 25, 30 big players. So the research won't take you forever. It'll become quite apparent quite quickly.
I think earlier on you had mentioned some companies coming to you and saying, oh, we need a metaverse. Is there a build versus buy question for larger brands that you get? And should any brand be building their own metaverse?
I haven't seen any brand build their own metaverse yet. Not for most of the metaverse platforms and the metaverse builders are doing it to be the platform, and then a general purpose land essentially. You do get a couple like sports icon guys. They specifically will only do sports stuff. You can't hold a music gig or whatever there. But I haven't seen any brand invest enough in building their own metaverse. That's a good question. I suppose at the moment, the cost to employ a development team and Web3 engineers and all of that stuff is too high. And not only that, once you've got the metaverse built, you've then got to drive the traffic to it. And it's much easier to, basically make a MySpace page on MySpace rather than go and invent MySpace just for your brand. It's over engineering. We might see it in the future, though. We might see, essentially conglomerates of luxury brands, or there might be like the car world, and there might be like the food world and things like that. But I can't imagine that taking place. I imagine it will be umbrella companies might make a metaverse. For example, EA might make the EA metaverse, and underneath it you have the Halo, all the EA games, Halo, blah, 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 and they're all sort of joined together. But I think we're still a few years away from that. At the moment, it tends to be individual platform developers who then, come and buy our stock, essentially, come and buy our product, just because the
fair enough. And I mean, on that question of cost, if I'm small, I'm a small brand, what general advice would you give if I want to build in the metaverse? You've already mentioned that there's models emerging where people might rent land, which sort of lowers costs. What general advice would you give to a small brand?
If you're a small brand and you've done your research and you've convinced that being in the metaverse is the right thing to do, I think approach a building company that specializes in this stuff and really build up a good rapport with them. You want to make sure that they are going to bring your imagination to life in the correct way and that they're going to educate you on the process as they're doing it. It's not like going to a website company and saying, I need a website, and then they come back to you and you're like, yeah, okay, that'll do. You very much need to be involved in the design process and stuff like that. So, and there's loads of companies all over the world that are doing fantastic jobs. So go and find someone that will work closely with you and make sure that your vision is realized. That's very important. In terms of trying to save cost, there's always potential to, as a brand, to partner with other brands. They might even be your competition, but in this experimental phase that we're in, all of you will benefit from the understanding and the learning that you'll get. So, if you're a fitness brand, for example, maybe talk to some of your competitors and say, hey, do you want to go 3-way on this, this experience? It'll be a fantastic news story. Collaboration / co-competition is always an encourageable growth path. If anyone's ever read Growth IQ by Tiffany Bova, she talks about the 10 paths of growth. One of them is collaborating with your competitors. So it's definitely worth looking at as well. And then I think other thing to do is, because this is such, in such early stages, you have to take all of these lessons with a pinch of salt. Some of the virtual worlds and the metaverses that are around now might not be around in 5 years. They might be superseded by something better. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't pour all of your money into Decentraland or Sandbox or whatever, and then, get 5 years down the line and go, well, we've got this land now and no one's using it because everyone's moved to the new platform. So just bear that in mind and be a bit cautious, I suppose. But this is the best time ever to experiment in it. So when it's in these early stages, become an early adopter. Just by listening to this conversation, I think you're probably ahead of 95% of the population anyway. So that's fantastic work. And just keep trying to strive for the next thing, the next step.
That's kind of a beautiful place to end it, actually. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that, I should have asked you, because if I am a brand listening to this, I need to know to succeed?
I don't think so. You've been very thorough. It's been an enjoyable discussion, I must say. I'm sure there are people watching that will have questions and can always go and ask either of us, and we'll do our best to answer you. So I'll leave that question. I'll turn that question back to the audience, I think, and say, please let us know if someone does have a
question for you. What's the best way for them to reach you?
I'm a LinkedIn addict, so you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Tom Sargent, or you can drop me an email if you want. tom@expensivejpeg.com, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. If you drop me on LinkedIn, I'll probably get back to you within minutes. So
great. Well, if anyone in the audience hits Tom up on LinkedIn, let us know how many minutes it took him to reply. Let's see if it's true.
Oh no, I've done myself great.
Thank you so much, Tom. So I'm going to end it there. Thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to reach out to Tom, he's just shared his LinkedIn details. I would highly recommend following him. I think that he authors some of the most interesting and practical content on Web3 and growth and marketing. So give him a follow. I do. Thank you very much for listening.